Welcome, and thank you for joining RSI Security and CMX today for our joint webinar on the top tools and techniques for achieving PCI compliance. So with the complexity of PCI compliance, we're here to discuss ways to streamline your processes and set up your team's workflow year-round to ensure every step is planned, communicated, and completed. Retailers have their own set of challenges that we'll touch on as well, but we'll have information applicable to all industries. So a little bit about RSI Security. We are headquartered in San Diego, California. We are a premier managed IT security and compliance advisory service provider. If you want to show that on the next page. Thank you. We have professionals for all cybersecurity and compliance needs, from PCI to healthcare data compliance, threat detection and incident response, cyber defense, privacy and government programs, and more. We are a PCI qualified security assessor and an approved scanning vendor organization. Our team will thoroughly guide you throughout your entire PCI journey to compliance to get you certified. We have many amazing clients, including Verizon, Samsung, the City of Beverly Hills, just to name a few. We also have many retail and e-commerce clients. And regarding our certifications, RSI has an expert team of experienced and certified assessors, analysts, program managers, and technologists. These are some of the some of the certifications that we have here, including PCI, HITRUST, Certified Ethical Hacker, CMMC, and many more. And we're joined today by CMX, also headquartered in San Diego, California. CMX is an SaaS solution provider. Their software solves problems and sets up workflows for supply chain quality, product safety, compliance, and operational execution. Some of CMX's clients are pictured here and include these major retail and restaurant chains. The ActivityStudio software that we'll discuss today is a complete solution for executing programs with consistency, transparency, and control across teams of all sizes. So let me tell you a little bit about today's presenters. Peter Fanoff is a PCI qualified security assessor with over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity and compliance. Peter is an expert in compliance programs, including PCI, CMMC, GDPR, CCPA, and more. James Gunn Wilkinson has over 30 years of technology and leadership experience. James is an expert in technology strategy, supply chain, and quality management, and he developed the strategy for CMX's innovative ActivityStudio software that we're going to discuss today. But before we get into the presentation, just a couple quick things to note. We'll be holding a 15-minute Q&A at the end of our presentation, so please submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, just to keep them all in one place. And this presentation, along with your CPE certificate and some other resources, will be provided to you tomorrow via email. So now I will pass it off to our presenters to get us started.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I hope you're having a great day, and thanks for attending. James Gunn. You know, today's world with all the challenges of the last year and all the challenges everybody's operated before that. There's been a lot of challenges for retailers, hospitality, restaurants, with large, complex operating environments to execute well and ensure the safety and compliance and following of all their standard operating procedures in highly distributed environments. You know, monitoring and training has been tough due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Obviously, there's high turnover typically in these retail environments, and consumer expectations are higher than ever. And just making sure you're doing the right things every day in your locations at all levels of your hierarchy is always a tough tough thing to do, and it's increasingly important, I think, now with increased attention to risk management.
Yes, this is Peter Faniff, and I'd like to add a little bit to that slide. Having been an ISA working on internal to a company, and now as a QSA working external to a company, I know that the PCI audit cycle can be somewhat stressful, and in many companies, unfortunately, wait until a couple of months before the deadline to try to begin to collect all the evidence and to satisfy the auditor's requirements, whether the auditor be internal or external. And that puts undue stress on the IT teams, whether it be the networking team or the server team, to collect the necessary evidence. And if that also coincides with their peak business cycle, it becomes a real problem and, quite frankly, stresses everybody out. So I think one of the solutions that we've come to today with both CMX and RSI is that CMX's platform allows that workload to be distributed over the course of the year. And many of the PCI requirements are, either monthly or quarterly or semi-annually or annually. And the technology allows that to be assigned, to the individual groups who are responsible for collecting that evidence at a frequency that's not crunched into the end of the year. And thus the audit cycle for PCI compliance, while it's lengthy, the workload can be easily distributed using the technology that CMX provides. On this one, as you may know, if you've been around PCI long enough, that policies are everything, policies and procedures. And policies, many of them are complicated. They involve multiple departments. Some, with information security policy, as you see in this one, there's sections that are applicable to the networking group. There are sections that are applicable to the development group. And those sections have to be reviewed annually, and they have to be certified that all the individuals within the organization have kept up to date on the policies and reviewed them. And so another key factor here is that CMX's technology allows that review process to be distributed and linked to the individual groups who are responsible for it. James, you want to talk a little bit about activity?
Yeah, so yeah, it's great to have all these different compliance and certification programs that you need to keep up with, and it all kind of starts with bringing that all together in some kind of a central SOP and policy management, which then can be turned into activities which are done on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, with easy access and review for both the policy and your standard procedures for how you would execute against that policy. And of course, as you said, they could be broken down into, micro assessments or just daily things that should be done, evidence gathered, so that when you get towards the end of the year, it's not crunch time. And that's what we think we're very good at. We've worked with some of the biggest retailers to ensure they're delivering on their promises, whether it's their certification promises or their brand standard promises, their guest experience promises in their retail locations. And we think it's all part of getting people engaged in a single system where you can worry about how to execute well on the things that matter most to your business.
Part of the requirements for PCI is obviously collecting evidence. There's extensive documentation that's required. In that evidence collection process, if it's done throughout the year, minimizes the burden on the individual teams who are responsible for collecting their portion of the requirements, and that having that evidence collected in a central location ultimately can streamline the process so that once the evidence is collected and it moves to the next step in the workflow, then the review can take place against the evidence against the requirements. And CMX's ActivityStudio implementation has some great features that support that.
Yep. Thanks, Peter. You can see here, we've got a screenshot of our tablet. Obviously, we're mobile optimized. We have native iOS, Android, and Windows applications in all the app stores. They synchronize with your main SaaS platform site. bring down all the activities, the procedures, the policies that relate to them, and present them to the user in an easy to manage format with available hints and suggestions, ensuring you get accurate data collection and can have intelligent forms with ability to trigger subsequent questions if there's certain findings found and you'd like to get down to root cause analysis. That can be done as well. So it's a very good way to manage change when there's changes to your policies or through regulations or changes to the certifications you're following, such as PCI, introduces any new requirements, or maybe your environments change and your suggestions as to how those environments should be checked changes. You can roll those out right away and ensure everybody's up to speed on that.
One of the key things that we provide, RSI provides is guidance. Guidance as to what that requirement requires to understand the requirement better, so that the user can actually understand what evidence needs to be collected, how it should be collected, what's appropriate, for the collection process. And so we provide guidance. So in addition to the corporate policies and procedures, we provide additional guidance, and that guidance is actually built in to the ActivityStudio platform. So you can go from the policy to the procedure to actual guidance around the requirement, what's collected, and then actually collect the evidence as we indicated in the previous slide. And all of that's built into the application. And RSI's guidance and the PCI guidance is populated in the template to allow you to very quickly search and retrieve what's necessary to meet the requirement.
Yep. And as you can see here, we're pretty proud of our scheduling and notifications and reminders and task assignments. We do a lot with complex roles and hierarchies, ensuring that the right people in the organization are being assigned the correct tasks, and that if they're not being done, or if there's a lot of things wrong, the findings which are triggered are being escalated, and any corrective actions are being reviewed by the appropriate parties. So really the key here is making sure things don't fall through the cracks.
Yes, and that's exactly right. We want to make sure that no step is missed or done incorrectly, and those steps are assigned to the individuals or to the groups or departments who are responsible for it. In addition to that, as they begin the process of collecting evidence in the workflow automation that takes place, if there is any issues surrounding that evidence, the workflow and the person on the other end reviewing the requirement against the evidence can in turn indicate there may be an issue with the evidence, or may be accepted, so that in turn becomes part of the certification process at the end of the annual audit cycle.
Yep. And as you go through those processes, we identify those missed questions, sometimes called observations or findings. Obviously, we create the corrective action workflows around those as deemed necessary. And at the end of the day, you have actionable insights, so data from what is being done well and what's being missed frequently in your organization, so you can drive organizational change or process change to get those really nagging continuous issues out of the system. And here we're just describing the corrective action review workflow process. We have a highly configurable process. In this case, the example is really where somebody's missed something in a PCI form, and a reviewer such as RSI or an internal audit team or internal compliance reviewer is providing a suggestion back to that person in the location as to what they should do to correct the issue, or telling them maybe it's not good enough, or I don't believe you, provide evidence that you actually corrected it. So there's a lot of different ways to run these workflows, but a a lot of the time it might be that there's an issue with the hardware that's installed in one of the locations. Maybe they're all old firewalls, or there's no firewalls even in place. There's a bunch of new locations that were stood up, and they had a shortcut. They didn't put up. They just got a router in, but there's no real configured firewall. Somebody like RSI, you know, it would be great at managing those remediations with boots on the ground to go out. I know they've done that before for clients with lots of locations where they have local staff available to remediate such things.
Yes, so and a little bit about what else we have to offer. So as we've talked about, you know, the CMX system, ActivityStudio really does, you know, distribute the tasks and activities throughout the organization. And because of the way that it's worked, we can work as a partner in that through a capability that we have to log into the CMX platform and help advise the clients throughout the year, so that in the event that they have questions regarding issues that come up or whether they are approaching the audit cycle properly, we can proactively review that, you know, through the tool set. We can advise the clients on what is required for those periodic assessments, and we can do that throughout the year. And in addition to that, as the evidence is collected, we can review and certify the collected evidence so that when the annual audit date comes up, most of that work is already done. It becomes a less stressful, almost routine process by which we complete the audit and finalize the collected evidence, certifying compliance with the appropriate PCI documents, whether you have a complete ROC or SAQD or whatever flavor SAQ that you may be, you know, part of. And then we can go ahead and produce the final report for submission to the bank or card companies as your company is required. In addition, throughout the year, we provide vulnerability scanning, which typically is quarterly, annual penetration testing services, and then if you're a service provider, PCI requires a semi-annual segmentation penetration testing. All of these can be scheduled in the software, so we know what's appropriate not to impact your business needs. We can do it in the middle of the night if necessary, so that all of the testing services are done without impacting your business. And all of that can be done through our managed services offerings.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Well, now we're gonna just switch pace real quick because we want to show you we actually have, you know, real software, not just some slides. I'm not going to go through an extensive demo, but I'll touch on just showing you kind of some of the experience from different actors in your organization. So let me just switch to my location person. So here you can see I'm logged into our web application. So this is just a demo site. I'm logged in as a location manager. In this case, it's a restaurant. So we have some IoT devices that are monitoring refrigerators. They go out of temperature, you know, they'll actually turn red, and actually a finding and a corrective action will be assigned to that person at that location right away, with escalations to ensure a regional manager comes and fixes the fridge before they lose all their food. You can see I have a calendar of things that I should be doing in the location. So we're, you know, here, I've got a monthly PCI assessment coming up. I've also got a bunch of other things that need to be done in my location. I can quickly start any one of the activities that I have available to my role. And what I'm going to do here is, just before I jump into this activity, is show you also from that location's perspective all the different policy manuals they have access to. So you know, if you're opening new locations, you need your construction policies and procedures. You got your PCI, your brand standards, any policies you can dream up. We can house. We have editor roles with review and approval steps for these types of policies. And the policies are, let me just refresh this. It's been a while since I had it up. The policies are searchable, linkable, deep links to different ones. So if you wanted to find every policy to do with network, let me actually type in there. You can search and find, you know, the elements that relate to networks. And then if I wanted to embed this, actually embed this into a policy, I can by clicking on the deep link and placing it in my intranet, etc. But also when you're building your activities, you're able to reference all of these policies. So now we'll just drill into one of our PCI assessments, and I'll go ahead and open a new one here that's scheduled for next Monday. And you'll just get to see we drop into a form. Now this form I'm using our web application, but if you were on our native device, it would be tablet size, etc., and phone size, and works very nicely there. So here you can see I think I opened this and hit yes or no already. But this is our first question in our daily system procedures. Just orienting you to this UI. We have what we call departments. So this is our system operating, and we also have a set of questions, our human resources operating procedures here. This form is completely managed by, it comes as a template, but it can be completely managed by your organization. And I'll show you that a little bit so you can make them your own. So here we can just quickly take a look at what we have. We have some guidance. So we have guidance on what should be done, how you should be doing this and what kind of evidence to collect. And then we have the policy, which is, the actual policy is required in your InfoSec policy per your PCI DSS requirements. So I'm gonna go ahead and say yes. And then I can click on this Guide Me button, which on a mobile tablet is actually really nice. It's right there by your thumb. You click on this, and it's always taking you to the next thing you need to answer. If I could just go back here, instead of saying yes, maybe I'll say no. And, I'll have to put a reason in, and then we'll have a finding. So, forgot to check this month. Move on. I can say yes, and you can see it highlighted it red because I hadn't done it before. And go through, just rip through these really quick. Let's say, and then did I do any quarterly? So this is where we're showing like an example of conditionality. So if I say, yes, I had some, quarterly things that were done, it'll give me all the quarterly things to say, did you do them? But for the sake of brevity, I'm going to not go into that because we'd be here for a while answering them all. Same thing with annual. I can look at something like this. Maybe I want to see what the policy looks like for this. Maybe I want to look at what a sample card data flow or sample artifact for a network looks like because it's asking me for a network diagram. I'd like to see some examples of that. I could do that. I'll skip that for now because they're not that interesting. And we'll just say no on the annual so I can make it through quick. And I'm going to go on here, and it's going to take in HR. We'll just say yes, 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 yes. Get through all these quickly. And I should be done now. Oh, no. Here we go. Almost done. There we go. Now I can submit, which will, take it over to a signature page. We have a canvas control here, which basically is something I can use to, do a poor signature or a good one. If you're on a tablet, it looks a lot better. And I can complete my activity. That just takes a second. It creates the corrective actions, findings, assigns the workflows. Here's a quick findings table, which shows all the things, both positive and negative answers. Now we go back to the manager view, or administrator view at this case. This is the above location user who's in charge of reviewing these things. You can see I've got a corrective action here. We can go in and take some action on that. In this case, there's one corrective action. It's in review. I can see, you know, the activity findings from this earlier one. There's an out of compliance observation. There's 35 that are in compliance, one that's out of compliance, and I can go in and review this corrective action. And then, you know, I can provide notes, you know, like, you know, ensure your calendar is reminding you, and then I can return it or I can approve it. So I could say that's not good enough, or I could approve their corrective action, which they said they were going to do, which was to remember next time to ensure all user accounts were disabled. In this case, you know, this is the question that was violated. They said no. You know, they said they, you know, they said they forgot. And so I'm going to approve it at this point, that next time, hopefully they've set a reminder and they're not going to. So that's kind of like a simple corrective action workflow. Then, you know, this is great. You know, it's wonderful that you have these forms and everything, but are they maintainable and can you make them your own? So here, what I'm doing is, I'm just going to refresh this. I'm showing you our builder framework. So this is the admin tool for someone like an RSI or your own internal IT teams or admin teams. All of our customers actually build and deploy all their own activities and write all their own policies and procedures. We provide starter templates for things like PCI assessments, et cetera. And in this case, you can either edit an existing one or you can clone an existing one to create a new activity. I've already done that, so I'm just going to click in, and I called it yearly PCI. And here you'll see there's a set of 9 steps basically to deploy an activity. I'm already past the define activity step, which is where I say what I want to call it. If I want to do anything too crazy, I could configure some advanced things there. Now I'm in the build step where I can edit my questions. So here, you know, is the actual question text that I'm looking at. Here are the instructions that go below, you know, around guidance and what you should be doing. And then I can link to my policy guide. So here you see I actually have a policy link to where my policy manual is, so that it references right out of the manual. I'm not editing my policy within here. You can edit it and update your manual from within here, but it's a unique link to your policy. So you don't have your policies having to be updated in many places. When you update it once in our system, it'll update the main policy as well. And then you can configure answers. You know, you could say yes or no, or positive, negative, or whatever you wanted it to say. You can define points, and you can say if there's a corrective action, how many days do you have to correct that? And you can provide, you know, different kinds of boxes and collection methods. You can require photos and attachments. You can make recommendations. So your recommendations might, you know, say what they should be doing. I won't. No. So you could say provide a multi-pick predefined list, or a text drop or a text box, or a single pick drop down. So depending on how much you want to prescriptively provide recommendations for what they should do if they're might get something wrong, that's handy. We have a whole bunch of different kinds of questions that you can put in here if you just want to have different question types other than yes, no, Likert scales, temperatures, timers, all sorts of good stuff. And then we have a library. So unlike a lot of tools where you build this and the questions are all kind of constrained to within this particular form, you could look for monthly across my whole library, and I can find like this, bring it right in. And now I have options when I bring it in to either link it, or I can I can say clone this, and when you clone, you disconnect it from the original question, so you're not inheriting things if you just want to use it as a starter question. Anyway, that might be a little much for everybody at this point, just getting familiar, but a lot of stuff possible here. And then you'll set up scoring. So I'll just go ahead to scoring, and in scoring, you can decide if, how you want to configure it. All sorts of great, stuff for people familiar with audit scoring. So you can do ratings, you can have goals. Ratings are typically, if you get 90 to 100, or, you get satisfactory or excellent, etc. Just another way to kind of gamify things there. And then we have all the way to workflow to corrective actions, scheduling, etc. I don't think we'll, go through all of those things because they're pretty advanced, but I think the idea here is really, I'm going to cancel out of this and just show you quickly, there's a library of other forms. And let's go back. So you can see on our, this is our demo site. There's 107 different activities, from food safety checklists with Bluetooth integrated temperature probes. There's large audits with review. And then we have Tableau integrated reporting in our application, which allows you, once you have all your observations and findings, the number of days it's taking to remediate or correct things through corrective action workflows. All those things are exposed in reports for your management teams to see, how they're doing regionally, nationally, globally, et cetera, across lots of different metrics that you're collecting every day. So that's very useful. And Tableau is, we basically provide row level security so that all of your users, depending on their level in your hierarchy, they only see the locations they're supposed to have access to, the data associated with that. So we find a lot of customers that are familiar with Tableau, have internal teams able to use that, and are able to do a lot of self-service BI due to that. And I think at that point, we've kind of covered everything, so we'll kick it back.
All right. Thank you, James. I think, the benefits of working together on this is pretty obvious. The work is distributed, it's scheduled, it's got workflow behind it, and it really, helps avoid any last minute snags, make sure that there aren't any surprises or any roadblocks to the compliance. And it really does make for a perfect handoff, where CMX's ActivityStudio manages the workflow, and RSI expert audits and ensure that your steps along the way are in compliance with regulations. And CMX's ActivityStudio really does a great job of assigning roles and responsibilities, and making sure that the deadlines are met with accountability and full visibility. And then along the way, RSI can check and make sure that each of the requirements are being checked and evidenced properly, and the documentation is complete, and guaranteeing that at the end of the day that the audit will be a successful audit. And in long-term success, we setting up this dynamic exchange between RSI and CMX really does help you as a team and your teams across multiple locations have a clear and definitive path to making sure that your PCI certification process goes smoothly throughout the year with minimal impact on your organization. At the end of the year, you're reaching full compliance and you're submitting your attestations on time.
All right, thank you so much, Peter and James. If anyone in the audience has a question they haven't submitted yet, you can do so now using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. But right before we get into the question and answer portion, I want to go over a couple resources. Tomorrow via email, you'll receive a copy of this presentation and your CPE certificate for attending. We're also going to send you a link to request a consultation and some PCI resources. So now I will pass it back to you to get into the question and answer portion.
All right, it looks like the first question there is this current environment with COVID-19, are you using virtual assessment or still going on site to view the evidence? Actually, that depends on the environment. So most clients these days, or a lot of our clients these days, are cloud-based, and a lot of the PCI requirements focus on physical security around data centers, and obviously with a cloud-based infrastructure, that doesn't come into play. So in those cases, we're actually doing virtual on-sites. In other cases where there is a large and significant, on-site data center presence or call center presence, in those particular cases, we're actually doing on-site visits and evidence collection, because those really do have a significant presence that we have to ensure that those requirements for physical security, et cetera, are being met. So it really depends upon the environment, but I would say 80 to 90% are virtual these days until COVID lessens up on some of the exposure issues.
All right, and I think we have another question here about CMX. Client having CMX locally, does it export sync with something like TCT auditor side? Yeah, so CMX supports an XML format for all of the assessments, and they can be located or exported to other applications. We have business API for doing that. We also support like a data lake, push those objects to Azure or Azure Blob Storage or an Amazon S3 bucket. And then you could have lambdas or other things triggering those XML objects to be picked up by other tools. We also do, REST API pushes of those objects to tools as well. If you provide us what they need to go to, it's a configurable process, doesn't really require any development. Hopefully that answers that. But also we do have large audit organizations doing ISO 27K, automotive, aerospace, etc. Bureau Veritas does that globally using our software. So we have a lot of professional auditing organizations actually using our software for the audit and review and certification side of the process.
Looks like there's another one. Can we choose QSA or can we choose any QSA or just RSI with CMX application? No, you're certainly capable of choosing any QSA to work with CMX. We just happen to have a very good relationship. We've spent a lot of time, thinking through how this, works together and building out these templates for the different SAQs. And so we feel like as though the relationship gives us a significant advantage, which is passed on to you by eliminating a lot of that startup time that would be required with the QSA that's not as tight as we are together.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely enjoy working with RSI, but the system is set up for any internal or third-party reviewer to participate in the workflows.
Yeah. Next question is, how do you provide support for a service provider who is completing SAQDs? Sounds like you may be doing a self-assessment. You're not a level 1, maybe you're a level 2. You have an SAQD, or for that matter, any SAQ, whatever form it may be. The way RSI works with the service provider is we will help them through an advisory process to look at the various SAQD requirements, make sure that the evidence that's being collected is appropriate and sound, and we'll help you through that whole process to make sure that all of that is done. And if necessary, we can actually sign off on it as well as part of the audit process. So we can provide advisory or advisory plus audit or just audit to review the final internal product. A number of different ways to do that. I also saw there was a question in there, can we also look at, doing both ASV scans and pen testing as well as providing the QSA function? And the answer to that is yes.
Yep. I think we've got a question here about creating custom questionnaires that map to certain PCI SAQ types, such as an SAQC. Yeah, I mean, like, sky's the limit in terms of creating custom questionnaires and even consolidating multiple standards into a single InfoSec policy with the critical control points mapped between those, right? You could be doing, ISO 27K. You could also be under PCI. You could have a common policy that meets both standards. If you chose to take that on, it's a good mapping exercise. Out of the box, they're all going to be separate sets of policies and separate sets of questionnaires, but you can create anything in ActivityStudio, really, if you have the time and are willing to put in the effort. So you can just customize existing, or you can combine certifications and questionnaires.
That's an interesting point, James, because actually, as any SAQ, whatever flavor it may be, is nothing more than a list of requirements. And so, yes, you can create a template, for any SAQ, any flavor of SAQ. But the interesting point that James just brought up is that while you may have multiple security frameworks that you're obligated to comply with, and let's face it, at the end of the day, there's a lot of redundancy between security frameworks. They all ask, do you have, a password that's X length with special characters or whatever. I mean, it's almost common throughout all of the security frameworks. And the interesting thing is, if you can link those, you're answering it once and you're providing that evidence, for potentially multiple frameworks that you're obligated to comply with. So there is, if you want to take the time to, to do that mapping, as James indicated, a huge benefit downstream. Do it once to many. The segregation of duties. QSA can be an ASV for the same site. If you have but yes, it's typically a different department. So the way RSI approaches the segregation of duties is our pen testing group is totally separate and independent, organizationally speaking, from the QSA side of the group. So yes, the independence is guaranteed through that process of how we're structured as an organization.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've covered all these.
There is one question submitted in the chat. Can we map up link PCI DSS with other regulations such as GDPR and frameworks such as ISO 27001?
Yep. Yes, we can. It's a fun process. You can build out that consolidated policy, and you can build out consolidated questionnaires for them, and then your findings could relate to both standards and your observations and any evidence that you're collecting.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, Peter and James, and thank you so much to everyone that was able to join us today. We'll be in touch via email. Bye.
Right.